Okay, so welcome, Jeff. Pleased to have you join me for this little interview today. I think your last name is pronounced Chilton, is it not? Um,
Yes, that's absolutely right, Chilton.
okay, well, my first name is pronounced Karis. It's a CH also, so I don't assume anything with people who have a CH in their name, but
Thank you. I was wondering about that.
yeah, yeah. So this is Jeff Chilton, everybody who's listening, and he is president and I guess founder of Nammex Organic Mushrooms. Um,
That's correct, yeah.
okay, and he's going to give us a little introduction about who he is and how he got where he is today.
Well, I'm a child of the Pacific Northwest. I was born and raised in Seattle, an area that is very green from all the water and the rain and the forests. And in our part of the world, in our ecosystem, we have a lot of mushrooms. Mushrooms have been around me from the very beginning. And I'm also a child of the 60s.
Hmm.
And in the 60s, we were looking at a lot of alternatives. Certainly magic mushrooms came up, and that was very fascinating to me. And at the university, I actually studied, my major was anthropology. And then I also studied mycology, and part of my work in anthropology was the study of mushrooms that were used in other cultures, especially for shamanic purposes and for healing. So in a sense, this was for me ethnomycology.
Hmm.
But when you leave university as a anthropologist, there's not a lot of job openings. But I wanted to look at mushrooms a little deeper, and I went to my mycology professor and I said, I'm really interested in growing mushrooms. Can you help? And he said, well, there's a mushroom farm 60 miles down the road. Why don't you go down there and see if you can get a job? I did. I got a job there in 1973.
Hmm.
And I was
How
there on this phone.
old
I know before you were born.
Oh,
I, I got a job on this farm. I was there for the next 10 years. I was literally living with mushrooms during that period. And I was a production manager, and we were growing at the time 2 million pounds of agaricus mushrooms. And Karis, the wonderful thing about it is we had a Japanese scientist there who was experimenting with shiitake, oyster mushrooms, and enoki-take. So I was exposed in the 70s to these other mushrooms that were being cultivated. And for me, it was just like, oh my goodness, this is so interesting. In 1983, I co-authored a book called The Mushroom Cultivator, Practical Guide to Growing Mushrooms at Home. And then in 1989, I founded Nammex, which is my company that sells medicinal mushroom extracts to the nutritional supplement industry. And just what was interesting is I was walking the floor of Natural Foods Expo in 1989, 1990 with a reishi mushroom in my hand.
Hmm.
And I was showing it to companies saying, do you know anything about medicinal mushrooms and the fact that they've been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine? They just look at that reishi like, what is that thing? It looks like a piece of wood.
Hmm.
And it was a chicken and egg thing. Well, there's no demand for mushrooms. Why should we buy them? So it took a lot of effort during the 90s to educate people, get books and articles written, and get people to even consider using mushrooms as a supplement.
You were ahead of your time because look where we are now, right?
And all of a sudden, here in 2018, and the last couple of years, mushrooms are trending, and they're the new superfood. It's like, hey, I knew that all along.
Yeah, yeah. So when you say you sell mushroom extracts, can you explain what exactly that means?
Well, what we do is we'll take a mushroom powder. We'll put it into very large tanks where we can cook it with water. So we'll cook it with water at 80 degrees C for 3 hours. Then we'll concentrate the fluid down. We'll take the powder and that fluid, send it to a spray dryer, and dry it to a fine powder. So that's what we call our one-to-one extract, in the sense that it's 1 kilo in and 1 kilo out.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting part about that is it's not just a mushroom powder. It's actually been extracted, digested, broken down a little bit, which makes it a little more available. And it's also a very fine powder. So when you're taking that, you're going to get a lot of the benefits out of that immediately. And it's going to be in a form that is a little more utilizable than, for example, just eating mushrooms. And believe me, I recommend that to everybody. Eat mushrooms, put them into your diet. They're a great food. You'll get the benefits from them, but these powders will put them in a form that will allow you to, like take a capsule or something like that. And it's in a form that's been broken down. So you'll be getting access to those beta-glucans.
So when you reached out to me via email, you highlighted some concerns that you have in the industry, the supplement industry, who selling medicinal mushrooms and regarding quality control. And this is something that's been highly on my mind. So you really grabbed my attention right away. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you started this conversation by email with me, but I'm wondering if you can share with the rest of us, what your primary concerns are and then how your company is addressing those concerns.
Well, first, let me just explain the life cycle of this organism that we refer to as a mushroom. The mushroom is actually a fruiting body, or the fruit of this fungal organism, and this organism manifests as what is called mycelium. Mycelium is a fine thread-like network that we normally don't see because it's either underground or it's in a piece of wood. That is the actual, what is called vegetative body of this organism. That is what is breaking down all of this organic matter out there. It's the mycelium. It secretes enzymes. It then pulls that material back into itself, and it continues to grow and spread. So this mycelium, the vegetative body, when conditions are right in nature, it will produce a fruiting body, or what we know as a mushroom. Traditionally, it's the mushroom that has always been used in traditional Chinese medicine. That's where most of the research has been focused. Well, what happens, and I can tell you this as a mushroom grower, is that I can grow a pound of shiitake mushrooms. I can take it to the market. He'll pay me $5 for that pound of shiitake mushrooms. But if I want to sell that as a supplement, supplements are dried powders. Mushrooms, like most vegetables, are 90% water. So now that $5 pound of shiitake, I have to get $50 for that same pound of shiitake. If you just multiply that out to be a kilo, now just a kilo of shiitake mushroom powder, unextracted, is going to have to sell for over $100. No company can take that mushroom powder, and again, it's just mushroom powder, and turn it into a supplement. It doesn't work economically. So what you have in the United States is companies now will grow out that mycelium, and they'll grow it out on sterilized grain. And this is not any kind of new or specialized process. Mycelium is what, as a mushroom grower, I would use as seed. Live mycelium, that's seed for growing mushrooms. This process of growing mycelium on grain started in the 1930s as a method of being able to spread this mycelium in a compost or some other substrate to grow mushrooms. It's an easy process. It's done in a laboratory. So what happens is that you'll take this grain, you'll put it in a plastic bag, you'll add water, you'll put it into an autoclave, you'll sterilize it. That sterilized grain comes out of the autoclave, you'll inoculate it with mycelium. The mycelium grows out and colonizes this grain. And then what happens is with companies in North America is they will dry that out, they will powder it without removing the grain, and they will sell it as a mushroom. Now, two things going on here. One, it's not a mushroom, it is mycelium. So it's like selling the root structure of something and calling it the fruit, or calling it the flowers or something like that. So when that product is being sold, you'll look at the label on the product, and it will have a picture of a mushroom. It will say reishi mushroom. And it may even say this is made from 100% organic mushroom. If you're lucky on the supplements facts panel, it might say mycelium, and then the other, it might say myceliated oats or myceliated rice or something like that. But the person that's actually buying that product, they will just look at the front panel and they'll say, I'm buying a reishi mushroom product, when in fact it's nothing of the sort.
Right.
It's not mushroom, it's myceliated grain. And here's the example that I want to give you, because this is exactly what it is. You're familiar with a product called tempeh.
Yes.
Tempeh is fungal mycelium grown on cooked soybeans. So if you want to know exactly what these products are, you can buy tempeh. That's exactly what these products are. And if you break open that tempeh, the question you should ask is, do I still see the soybean there? You see a lot of mycelium, but the soybean is still there. You can feel it. That is what they are producing and what they're selling. They're selling a tempeh-like product.
So just out of curiosity, is it just impossible to remove the mycelium from the grain if we're considering the mycelium is valuable?
It's impossible. You really can't do it. And here's the thing. People who grow these products say, look, there's all sorts of research out there that shows mycelium has beneficial properties. I totally agree. There is that research. Mycelium does have these properties. However, what we did is we did a big study where we analyzed all of these products. We analyzed mushrooms. We analyzed mushroom extracts. We bought bottles off the internet. In fact, in my study, we bought 40 different products that were these myceliated grain products. We tested them for beta-glucans. We have a test that is actually specific to beta-glucan. It's a mushroom beta-glucans. The test also shows what are called alpha-glucans. Alpha-glucans are the starches. What the test showed was that these myceliated grain products were mostly alpha-glucan, or starch. Well, of course, because they're mostly grain, with very low levels of beta-glucan, which means, if there's not beta-glucan in there, what it means is you have very little mushroom tissue, because the beta-glucan makes up over 50% of the cell wall of all mushrooms and mycelium. So if you don't have beta-glucan in there, you don't have fungal matter. So we showed that with our beta-glucan test. It was just the exact opposite of what you'd expect with a mushroom. Mushrooms don't contain starch. They do not have starch. Mushrooms will have some glycogen, like humans, but they don't have starch. So right away, you've got that. And then we did our gosterol testing. And our gosterol is the fungal sterol, much like our cholesterol. And they had 1/10 of the amount of ergosterol that we would find in a dried mushroom, because that was our baseline for testing. We tested a dried mushroom and we came up with a baseline. So we've got a number of these tests that showed that these products were mostly starch from the grain, very low amounts of beta-glucan from lack of fungal matter. And here's the final key to all of this, is we did a nutritional analysis. We did approximate analysis of fat, protein, carbohydrate, minerals. Well, guess what? These products lined up perfectly with the profile of the grain that they're grown on.
Right. So basically, I'm seeing two problems here. One is that if you're buying a product that is grown on is mycelia grown on a substrate such as rice or oats, you may be buying some very expensive rice and oats with some mycelia in it, is the
Correct.
first problem. And then
Correct.
the second problem is that you may be thinking, for example, with reishi, that you're going to be taking this supplement because it's rich in a component that's going to, let's just say, minimize allergies, right? Inflammation and allergies, or that have some benefit. If you've done some research, maybe you're looking for something that reishi has triterpenoids, and so you're buying this product. But the mycelia actually does not have triterpenoids. True.
That's correct. And here's the issue is the fruiting body is actually the chemical factory. It is producing all of these interesting compounds. Mycelium is kind of a poor sister to that. In China, they actually produce mycelium in large fermentation tanks. They produce pure mycelium and they put it out as products, for example, cordyceps CS4. That is a decent way to manufacture a fungal product. I don't think it's as good as producing a mushroom, but that is one way you can do it. But when you're actually producing mycelium on the grain and you don't take the grain out at the end of the product, you do end up with mostly starch. One of the things that I tell people to do is look, just pour that powder out of the capsule, taste it. We do what we call the reishi challenge when we go to trade shows and things. We'll have some reishi extract there, then we'll have some of the myceliated grain. You taste that myceliated grain, it tastes bland.
Yeah, it tastes right, sort of sweet.
It tastes sweet. Can you imagine reishi tasting sweet?
Right.
Well, that's from the grain, and imagine for a minute, and I have had phone calls from people. I have cancer. I'm looking for a mushroom product. Can you help me? Can you imagine those people buying these products and thinking they're getting the benefits of medicinal mushrooms when they're just getting starch from these grains? I'm really upset by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that begs the next question. Are companies evaluating their product? Are they testing for beta-glucans, and are they listing those on their labels?
Well, the companies that make these myceliated grain products, they do not test. And there's a reason why, because if they did test, they would demonstrate. What they do test for, which is interesting, is polysaccharides. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. Starch is a polysaccharide. Mm-hmm. So you can test and you can say, my products have 50 to 60% polysaccharide in it. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's mostly from the starch that's in the product there. And that's something that we found out when we started doing our beta-glucan test, because we had certain extracts that had been sent to us and the polysaccharide was way up. And I used to think, before I had the beta-glucan test, I used to think, wow, high polysaccharide, great product. Absolutely wrong. A lot of the products that I had been shown, in fact, did not have good levels of beta-glucans. Most of it was alpha-glucan from starches and carriers. Carriers are something that are used for extracts. So that's another way to unmask the carriers that might be in an herbal extract, is doing this beta-glucan test. And again, the key is that what we're looking for in a medicinal mushroom product are the beta-glucans. That's where all the research is. That's the primary benefit from medicinal mushrooms, are the beta-glucans. These are the immunologically active compounds, and they act in all sorts of different ways. They have all sorts of benefits for us. So for me, actually, to be able to measure the beta-glucans was a huge breakthrough for my company, because I've always wanted to and tried to measure what was in our extracts. In fact, in the 90s, we developed tests for triterpenoids, and we could actually measure the triterpenoids in reishi, which was which was huge because can you imagine? I'm traveling all through China in the 90s. I'm visiting farms. I'm visiting factories. I'm visiting scientific research stations. And all the commercial people are saying, hey, here's my mushroom extract. Don't you want to buy it from me? And I'm just looking at it going, it's just another brown powder. I have no idea what it is.
Right.
You have to have some way to actually test for these products to be able to know they're genuine.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. So, this whole topic that we're talking about came to the forefront of my thinking about purchasing and also prescribing. As a practitioner, I prescribe to my patients, and it came up when I was doing some research on chaga. And so, one of the articles that I read about it was, it was highlighting the difference between the mycelia and then the conch that grows on the birch itself. And one of the concerns by the author of that paper was that we could do, that over harvesting from the wild was going to really devastate this forest habitat, and that it was more ecological to grow mycelia, even though it is going to have a different function than the chaga that is, able to grow on the tree and extract components like betulinic acid from the birch itself. So that left me feeling like many of us we're wanting to be sustainable and green, and we certainly don't want to participate in deforestation. And at the same time, is this chaga product that's mycelial based, is it worth anything, or is it a completely different, maybe valuable, but a completely different value than what you're getting?
Well, let me speak to that, because first of all, the whole idea that chaga is over harvested is a meme that has been put out there by people who grow myceliated grain. I've heard these people say that, and the only investigation that was ever done out there was done by a person at Oregon State University. He investigated the issue, went to Russia, and investigated other areas in the United States, and found that there's absolutely no evidence for over-harvesting. And let me say this, chaga is a canker. It's a birch disease. It's, for one, it's a diseased tree. So the tree is dying. Right. The tree is absolutely dying from the beginning. When you harvest that chaga, it actually grows back. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't understand that either.
If you properly harvest it.
What's that?
If you properly harvest it.
Well, Karis, even what is properly harvesting? I mean, you take that, you remove that diseased portion, and the fact of the matter is the chaga is just a manifestation of the disease. The mycelium is what is killing that birch tree, and it's a dead tree standing, basically, and they figure that up to 20% of the chaga of the birch forest is infected. But that's just nature. I mean, all the trees in the Pacific Northwest, many of them are affected by polypores, and many of them ultimately die by polypores. The fact that we might remove them, all we're doing is just removing this fruiting body. The mycelium is still in there killing that tree. There's going to be absolutely no effect from doing it. And the fact is that the reason why we actually consume chaga, or the reason why it's got medicinal value, is because of that birch tree. That's where the precursor compounds come from to be in that chaga. And what's interesting about chaga is the scientists that did a study on that, a detailed study, determined that the chaga canker, it actually has only 10% mycelium in it. It's mostly woody tissue that has been consumed by the mycelium, but it's only about 10% of mycelium in that chaga canker. It's not a true sclerotia, it's a canker. Removing that canker does not affect anything, in my opinion. And I've even talked to United Plant Savers about this, because they were saying, oh, we have an issue with chaga. I explained to her what was going on. She never got back to me after that, because I think she decided there's things that are more worth her time to look at. There's absolutely no question that there's no chaga over harvesting. And let me also just say, I'm not really a big fan of wildcrafting. Wildcrafting always ends in tears. It doesn't seem to matter. But in this case, we are talking about fungi. They are naturally breaking down, and they're on trees out there. That's part of the whole ecosystem. They regenerate. We pull that manifestation, which is the conch that's growing off that tree. It's not going to do any damage to the tree. The tree's already dying. It's on its way out. It won't harm that tree in the least. So I take complete issue with this idea that chaga over harvesting could in fact be a problem at some point. It's just not the case. And any mycelium grown on grain will not have the compounds you're looking for. Absolutely will not. So the people selling chaga mycelium and saying, oh, this is a sustainable way to do it, it's disingenuous and absolutely untrue, because that chaga mycelium grown on grain is no different than any of the other species grown on grain. It does not, like reishi, doesn't have the triterpenoids that you'd want to get. And chaga's got some important triterpenoids.
So is the chaga that your company extracts, is it cultivated?
No, you cannot. Well, there are some experiments now, believe it or not, there's some experiments in Finland where they're actually infecting birch trees to grow the chaga. Well, think about that for a second. They're infecting birch trees.
Right.
They're spreading this disease.
Right.
And that's what it is. It is a disease. It's a tree pathogen. And whether or not you want to say that is a parasite or a saprophyte doesn't really matter. It's a pathogen. It will ultimately kill that tree. So, no, our chaga is actually wildcrafted in northern China and Siberia. That's where it's wildcrafted, and we then, and just like our turkey tail is also wildcrafted in China. And I consider that to be pretty much a similar thing. I mean, the fact that you could actually overharvest these things, I just do not see it. What does happen, and what some people will tell you, is that, oh, now we can't get chaga so close to the road. We have to go deeper in the forest to get these forests, especially birch, are vast. The idea that we could possibly touch them is absolutely misguided.
So I promised I was going to pick your brain about lion's mane. And I have to say that it is one of my favorite medicinal mushrooms for my own personal use. So I have used it. It's a myceliated form of it, but my body must do something great with it, because when my family is all getting sick, I just pound the lion's mane and I'm fine. And I've never found any mushroom that works as well as this one for me. And I sometimes think that, different mushrooms match up for different people. So, and I'd like to eat it as well. We have a local mushroom grower here in Pennsylvania, and so it's not as tasty as maitake, in my opinion, but we eat it as well. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of your wisdom on its medicinal properties. I know it's recently been sort of reputed to have some benefit for nerve growth, and I'm wondering what you think about that. But also, I have not really heard much about its immune benefit. I kind of stumbled upon it myself as this remedy to avoid getting sick that I've tried over and over.
All medicinal mushrooms, the major ones, they all have a beta-glucan architecture that gives them their potency, so to speak, because all mushrooms have beta-glucans in their cell walls. But because the architecture of the beta-glucan varies from mushroom to mushroom, that's what makes a medicinal mushroom versus a mushroom that's got beta-glucans and doesn't really have the powerful medicinal qualities. All mushrooms will have these benefits, but some just have a little more strength than others, and that's been sort of proven out by the research that's been done on them. Lion's mane does have these compounds. They think they are due to what is called haricinones or arenacenes. Arenacenes come from mycelium. Haricinones come from the mushroom itself. But they're still not certain. They're still looking for other compounds as well with lion's mane. So I don't think we really know exactly that these are the compounds responsible. They have shown certain of this activity. Maybe they are, but you know what? Ganoderma has these same qualities as well. It also stimulates nerve growth factor. Well, nobody's talking about haricinones and haricinones or arenacenes from Ganoderma.
Yeah.
So I you know, in all this kind of research, I like to see a body of evidence, just like with any mushroom that is supposed to be medicinal. I look at the traditional use. Lion's mane has been used traditionally for memory. It's been used for dementia. So you have to look at the traditional use and say, well, okay, this is what they discovered over thousands of years. There must be something there. And then I'll go to the scientific literature and say, is there any scientific research that supports these benefits that they're talking about? And there seems to be a reasonable amount of that. And it seems to be related to the fact of stimulating this neurite growth. And you know, the thing about it is we're neurons are dying and being regenerated all the time in humans. That's just happening all the time. So does this help by stimulating and producing more? Maybe that's the benefit. I don't really know. Again, I think it's there's still research that needs to be done. It's interesting, some of the actual clinical trials. We have a clinical trial with lion's mane where a group of 30 elderly people, they ate 3 grams of lion's mane mushroom powder per day. They had a control group, which was great. And then they gave them a battery of tests. And actually, after 3 months, the people who ate the lion's mane did better on the tests. When they stopped taking lion's mane, a month later, they tested them. They lost all those benefits. I think to myself, great. So you have to take lion's mane for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that works for you.
and you know what? I'd also like to speak to the fact of, you know, okay, you're saying, okay, yeah, I've taken lion's mane. It seems to work for me, knowing, of course, that you're taking a mycelium on grain product. And what I would say is, I speak to people all the time. They say to me, oh, I'm taking this great mushroom product. I say, oh yeah, what's the brand? They tell me the brand, and I say, well, I hate to tell you, but it's myceliated grain, and you're taking mostly starch. They've gotten benefits, and sometimes, you know, and don't get me wrong here, but placebo effect is always strong. Sometimes the person delivering the information to you is powerful. Some people, I consider some people to be placebos. Somebody it's just like a doctor. A doctor is a placebo. You go to the doctor, you say, I'm sick, I need this, and he says, don't worry, everything's fine. You walk away feeling better already. So I'm not saying your effects on lion's mane are placebo-oriented, but I would say, you know, I'd love to see you take a genuine lion's mane product and see whether there's any benefits. Because again, like I say, you know, it's like for me too. I see, you know, I read sometimes comments from people about certain products when you see them out there being sold, and sometimes the comments say, you know, a cold was coming on, I just took this mushroom product, the next day it's gone. And I'm like, you know what? That's not how it works. These things have to be taken for a period of time, 30 days, 60 days, for them to begin to act in any way. They don't work overnight. They're not like taking ibuprofen or an aspirin or something like that. They are general. There's something that you have to be consuming regularly. They don't work overnight. So when I see that, I just think, well, this is just the power of suggestion for a lot of people. This is placebo-oriented for a lot of people. This is just who we are as humans.
Well, that's an interesting thought. And I'm wondering if we're looking at lion's mane, the real stuff, the fruiting body, in terms of its immune effects, what makes it different than other medicinals? Why would somebody choose lion's mane other than for cognitive issues? Why would they choose lion's mane over reishi or turkey tail or maitake or any of the others?
Well, you know what? It's interesting. When we do our beta-glucan tests, and considering that beta-glucans are in fact the important immunological compounds in mushrooms, it's given us some real insight. And interestingly enough, the two mushrooms that have the highest amounts of beta-glucans are turkey tail and reishi.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming up behind them, and those have like between 50 and 55% beta-glucan. Maitake, somewhere around 40%. Lion's mane, somewhere around 35%. So the level of beta-glucan in lion's mane is high. Shiitake has a little less. Shiitake comes in around 30%, generally speaking. And getting back to these products where it's myceliated grain, those products in our analytical work average around 5 to 6% beta-glucan. Sometimes they are as low as 1%, and the 1% products often are the ones that have 10, 15, 20 different myceliated grain species in them. Those tend to be the absolute lowest in terms of beta-glucan. So all of these shotgun products out there, some of which are the best-selling products because people think, why should I just take one when I can take 20? Mm-hmm. You know, that mentality of kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Those products are actually the worst in our testing. They're the highest in starch and the lowest in beta-glucan. So one of the things, the beauties of this beta-glucan test, it completely unmasks all of these products and the amount of grain in there. And again, what happens is that the grain, the more grain or the more starch that we see, all that means is that it has crowded out the fungal tissue, because the beta-glucan is directly related to the amount of fungal tissue that's in that product. So if you have a low amount of beta-glucan, you have a low amount of fungal tissue. And this also is backed up by our testing with ergosterol, which is the fungal sterol. And here's what's very interesting too, is that ergosterol testing is what's used by the grain industry for fungal contamination. Because grain, the massive amounts of grain out there, they are very worried about aflatoxins, for one, from fungi. So they're constantly testing for ergosterol. Ergosterol gives them an idea of how much fungal contamination is in that grain. We can use ergosterol in the same way to give us an idea of how much fungal tissue is there. So if I take a shiitake mushroom, measure it for ergosterol, any of these actual dried mushrooms, measure it for ergosterol, we end up with a baseline. Here's what you'd expect from that mushroom for ergosterol. When these other myceliated grain products get tested, again, they're like 1/10 the content of ergosterol. So that again demonstrates to us there is not much fungal tissue. And I would again say to you, or anybody who's taking one of these products, taste the product. Does it taste bland? Does it taste bitter? There are companies out there right now, Karis, that are actually selling their so-called mushroom products, which are myceliated grain. They're selling them by saying, our product is bland. It goes with anything you want to put it in. Not only that, they say it doesn't taste like mushroom.
Right.
Can you imagine? It doesn't taste like mushroom.
Yes.
I think, is that not a red flag or what?
Right. Oh, this is a fascinating conversation. Really, really could probably talk to you all day about this. But can you tell us a little bit then about the products that your company offers and the availability of those products? I mean, I've never seen it on the shelf actually.
Well, you know what? All our products are based around the actual mushroom itself. So we grow our mushroom, and here's the other side of the whole idea that you can't grow mushrooms in North America and sell them as supplements. I realized that. I'm a mushroom grower. I realized that in the 90s as I traveled throughout China. I realized that this was the only, China grows 85% of the world's mushrooms. In 1997, I went to China with OCIA, and my company's been organically certified since 1992. I took OCIA to China. We held the very first workshop for organic certification of mushrooms in China, 1997. Since then, a few years later, we had organically certified mushrooms for China. I brought that ethic to my contract growers over there. I realized I needed to grow the mushrooms over there if I wanted to sell mushrooms as supplements. So that's what we did. We processed them over there. Before they leave China, we test them for pesticides, fungicides, heavy metals. We test them. We have a battery of tests that we use because we can't sell our products if they don't pass. When they arrive in the United States, we retest. So they're all tested twice. And listen, the myceliated grain growers in the United States, they are bashing us constantly with, oh, don't buy mushrooms from China. Oh, beware of China. On and on and on. Well, in the world that uses pesticides and fungicides, United States, Canada. I mean, but we all, if we want organic products, we all have to be vigilant. We have to go through a program to get organic products without chemicals. That's what we've done. We use only the mushroom. We process it into an extract because that's the form that we think is going to be most beneficial. A mushroom powder, nothing wrong with it, except you might end up having to take, I don't know, 10 capsules.
Right.
Nobody wants to do that.
Right.
So that's what we do for our products. That's what we sell. It's all mushroom based. That's what's traditionally been used. And that's where all the research is. The majority of the research is on the mushroom. And listen, the companies out there selling myceliated grain, all they ever talk about is mushroom, 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 mushroom. We sell mushrooms, 100% organically certified mushrooms, on and on and on. If you look at their products or look at the product literature, you think you're buying a mushroom. You're not. You're buying temp.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, I visited your website, and I just wanted to share to everybody watching this that if you go to Nammex.com, it's Nammex.com, right? You can get Jeff's paper. He's got a 28-page paper redefining medicinal mushrooms. And I think that you go in depth into some of the conversation that we had today in this little paper. And it's actually very beautifully done. And I think, so if you go there, you can sign up to get the PDF of this paper. And I think it's worth reading. I really highly recommend that. And I'm going to take this conversation a little further with you later, Jeff, and would love to have you back again to talk again sometime in the future, because this is really, well, for me, it's right up my alley. And I'm very grateful that you reached out to me via email and got my attention with a big lengthy email. But I only read 20% of my emails, so I'm glad I paid attention, and I'm glad you were willing to take the time today to share with us.
Thank you very much. And you know what? You can't believe how many people are resistant to any of this kind of information. And Redefining Medicinal Mushrooms has all of the information from my original study back in 2015. We continue every single batch of product that we make. We test it for beta-glucan, ergosterol, ergothioneine, other compounds. We have a body of data now on mushrooms that is deeper than really any other company in the world right now or research organization. So, and testing is very important to us because I want people to have the genuine thing. I believe in medicinal mushrooms. I want people to have the real thing. That's what's important. I helped create this category, and I don't want to see it being people out there taking products that are not genuine mushroom products thinking they are. I want to see them take the real thing. So that's what's important to me. So thank you so much for having me on. And yes, there's a lot of educational material on our website, and I encourage people to check out Redefining Medicinal Mushrooms too.
Well, I'll definitely be taking this information and you know, making make a big deal about it, because I, you know, for years I've been passionate about curating supplements, because I think there is a lot, there are a lot of supplements that are poor quality on the market, and people spend a lot of money on, you know, not just medicinal mushrooms, but probiotics, for example, is another, you know, category. But it, you know, the list goes on and on. And
Absolutely.
if it weren't for my little research for this online group, I have a little online subscription group, and if I hadn't been doing this series, actually, I wouldn't have stuck my nose into it so much to realize that there actually is a controversy here. In fact, I wouldn't have even really realized the difference between the mycelia and the fruiting body, really. And so I appreciate you clarifying that, and I'm excited to, you know, bring a better product to my patients and also to my followers online. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. Again, whenever you want to follow up with another one, I'm happy to speak to you about mushrooms. Or if you have any questions ever, just send me an email or something like that. I'd be happy to try and answer it for you.
all right. So if anybody listening to the replay here or live, if you want to send me an email with a question for Jeff, I'd be happy to, you know, convey that.